Beware, spoiler phobes! You have stumbled into a storm of spoilers. This podcast is split into two sections. In the first calm section, Neil and I will cover the fourth episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms titled Seven, and it's important on a podcast called A Storm of Spoilers to remind you that this episode has already aired to bypass Sunday's most superb owl, so make sure you've watched the episode. In the second storm section, Neil will use knowledge of the book series and the next episode preview to enlighten us about where the season is going for the remaining two episodes, and this time he doesn't even need to hide a Targaryen split amongst the trial of the seven from me. We're not ruining, we're enriching.
The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie. But what do we have left once we abandon the lie? Chaos. A gaping pit waiting to swallow us all. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
Hello, I'm Dave Gonzalez, and I have not read any of the books in George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire series.
And I'm Neil Miller, and I have read the books in George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire series, including The Hedge Knight, the short story upon which this season is based.
And welcome back to A Storm of Spoilers. A little bit early, I think, for all of us, depending on whether you listened to my advice on how to read Friday at midnight, or whether you know what actually Friday at midnight means, which means what I would call Thursday night. We got a new episode of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, so we are here, as promised, to talk to you about this fourth episode 7. A lot of stuff is happening, but because this episode came early, we put out our episode early, which does mean you will be getting the largest gap between in-season episodes from us here on Storm of Spoilers. We'll be returning to Monday afternoon episodes starting after the next episode of Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which airs on the 15th of February. So we have like 9 days. So hang in there, everybody.
It's not like there was a cliffhanger or anything.
Yeah, I know. Geez, not like I couldn't possibly wait any less time. Anyway, if you would like to, subscribe everywhere to catch up with us, you of course are here. You could get us on YouTube at both Dave and Neil and Storm of Spoilers, and make sure you're subscribed there because we'll be back in your feeds as soon as we can. And then after Night of the Seven Kingdoms is over, we're gonna head over into the Monsterverse and follow Monarch Legacy of Monsters. I'm wearing a Mechagodzilla Classic t-shirt today.
Hell yeah.
In preparation of heading over there. If you would like to get in touch with this show, you can email us at stormofspoilers@gmail.com. You can send us your questions, well-meaning corrections about the world of Westeros and soon to be the world of Godzilla, theories, and any lore questions that you would like us to answer in the storm with the gloves off and as much of our big brains as we could use to answer them. I would say you could email those questions about Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I hope to preempt some of your questions in this week's storm, but since we told you we're doing Legacy of Monsters, if you already have something that's giving you a bug on that, feel free to email us now. Get it out of the way. You could also review us on the Apple Podcasts app, which we used to call iTunes, and on Spotify, where you can not only rate us, but you can leave us comments on these episodes. Nothing new for you this week because, again, we had like 4 days or 3 days. I don't know the difference between time anymore. It's all been dilated. Make sure you're subscribed to us at youtube.com/stormofspoilers and youtube.com/Dave and Neil. The Godzilla one is only going to Storm of Spoilers YouTube. So if you want to see our faces talk about kaiju fighting, make sure you're subscribed there. And as always, patreon.com/Dave and Neil, Da7e and Neil is where you could find Neil and I year-round, basically multiple times a week, covering television shows, behind-the-scenes stories about movies we love. We watched The Cutting Edge from 1992 this week and saw some amazing figure skating and some physics-breaking figure skating. And a Slack that everyone can enjoy, one of the best places on the internet. Plus, you can access bonus content from previous seasons of Storm of Spoilers. If you're joining up for the first time, just scroll backwards on those feeds, and we've been around for, I don't know, probably over 10 years at this point.
Go check it out. Like 12 years.
12 years. Boy, howdy. At the highest membership level, which we call the Small Council, which is, of course, a Song of Ice and Fire reference, you also get access to our Hannibal rewatch pod that we call Eat the Rude. We are deep into their adaptation of Red Dragon, which is going to culminate in the climax of the entire series. So you still have time to join us over there. Or if you like to binge along with us, you now have 2.5 seasons worth of bingeable Hannibal podcasts at your fingertips. All right. I think I plugged us enough, Neil. Let's talk about Westeros. What happened? Usually this week. What happened since we last joined Duncan Egg and the Seven Kingdoms?
Well, Dave, quite a few things. This week in the Seven Kingdoms, Ser Duncan faces the music, but first he must converse with several Targaryen princes. He gets an apology from Prince Egg. He debates chivalry with the Crown Prince, Baelor, and ultimately demands trial by combat against his two accusers, Princelings Aerion and Darren. And because he's a little shit-ass, Aerion demands the obscure format trial of 7, requiring Dunk to find 6 other knights to fight for his cause. With a little help from his buddy Raymond Fossaway and his bald squire, plus a momentary backstabbing from Raymond's shitty cousin Stefan, he is able to round up 5 knights by dawn, which means Dunk must give a rousing speech to a crowd, calling upon one more knight, otherwise he will be found guilty. Luckily, the gods smile upon our hero, and as the OG Game of Thrones theme rises, his team's 7th member makes a grand entrance. It is the Crown Prince himself, Baelor Breakspear of House Targaryen. Let the trial begin next week or in 9 days. So there we have it. A nice little cliffhanger to send us off into Superb Owl Week. And plenty to talk about in between now and then.
Let me tell you, Neil, you got me. As somebody who, it used to be Storm of Spoilers back when Game of Thrones was airing, I would also be diving through a wiki of Ice and Fire in order to try to meet you and Joanna at the level of conversation that I was hoping for. Since we've been duoing, the way Storm of Spoilers seems to work is if one of us is sort of in the calm seat and one of us is in the storm seat and is willing to run, which means you had a chance to lay a trap for me, but the more I went back and listened, the more it wasn't a trap, the more I just artfully said, well, a Targaryen can't fight a Targaryen, and well, the Kingsguard can't fight a Targaryen. So I will say that after this episode ended, my first thought was, oh my God, what a huge adaptation choice. Otherwise, Neil would have told me. And then slowly the realization came over me that you had been hiding this particular thing, and I can't count to 7. So I would like to say to everybody that's maybe a little bit confused about how many knights are on the field, we will definitely go over it here in the calm. But also, congratulations, Neil, at having a thrilling little piece of surprise waiting for me when I just assumed they were going to make me shit ass Dundarian who's just here for the sex workers.
Yeah. Well, and listen, I'm glad that we were able to kind of keep this one, because as we talked about last week, and I think we talked about this a little bit in the calm and definitely in the storm, this show has turned a corner from being a buddy comedy to being more of a Game of Thrones show. And I feel like they literally did that by playing the entire theme song finally this week, where now we're getting the high drama, the backstabbing. We get multiple turncoat moments, I guess you could consider them, right? The big split between the Fossaways, where the apple tree has split in half. And then we have what I assume the Targaryen family will see as a bit of a betrayal, even though I think by the time we get there, we, the audience, are mostly on the side of Baelor, thinking, well, yeah, he's right. He sees in Dunk's cause the correct answer, which is he was just defending the innocent, and Aerion is a piece of shit.
I do like that in terms of a series of House of the Dragon. I'm going to also fall into the series. In terms of this now being our third Game of Thrones series, where basically the problems of the realm quickly become the Targaryen problems, or vice versa. This episode, uh, Egg, favorite Targ ever. I think there are some that are
Sure.
like, I've been on their side. I'm really on Daenerys' side for a large chunk of the original show. But I don't know really where I fall towards the end. Obviously, they get complicated. Obviously, as we sort of talked about in the Storm, there are some complicating things for Egg in the future. So I suspect it's here. But in this, especially at the beginning of this episode, with Egg having to not only be a cupbearer, I think, to his uncle, but also apologize to Dunk. And he does it in a way that isn't like condescending. I'm used to secret Targaryens, as soon as they've been unmasked, immediately putting on the Targaryen heir again.
Mhm.
Or I guess that's just a Rhaenyra sneaking through the, city sort of era. It's like once you're caught, you just sort of assume the mantle again. And so it was great to see Egg get a little teared up and to sit down on the prison cell,
Sure.
hay bale, to talk to Dunk. So Egg,
I believe in.
top of my list.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I believe that first of all, I definitely believe that he didn't want to be Darren's squire, because now that we've like fully met Darren, who would want to like hang out with that guy, and
Right.
especially if Egg, and I think this is one of the things we've learned about Egg over these first 4 episodes, is he genuinely does love this entire enterprise of knightliness, and
Yes.
he's a big fanboy of all the knights. He is sort of the perfect person to be a squire. So, whether he squires for Dunk or squires, he needs a good knight to squire for. And I genuinely think that he sees in Dunk the kind of knight that he really wants to squire for, as opposed to his older brother Darren, who just wants to party and be drunk all the time.
Yeah, but I'm also equally on Dunk's side in that scene. While we were watching it, Java's like, "Oh, he's even nice to the rat," which, like, of course, Dunk's not going to be mean to anybody. So I was a little worried that Dunk was going to be mean to Egg, but I think he's very just in what he said, which is basically the little prince did what he wanted without thinking much about what the consequences of his actions would be, which is very true. And, that's what happens when you're a little kid, and definitely when you're a little prince. But also Dunk immediately, even though he sort of chastises him in the cell, immediately stands up for him when he's in the company of Baelor, who is now also quickly rising the rank of my favorite Targaryens.
For sure.
And depending on how this season goes, might end up definitely towards the top. I've realized in the past, like, what House of the Dragon did to me is it made me root for a lot of Targaryens that I'm actually not ideologically aligned with. I just, in the whole black versus green debacle, I kind of need to pick a side that
Sure.
I'm emotionally aligned with.
It's tough to end up on Daemon's side.
Right? And it's like, man, I can't wait for him to kill his relatives, is basically like the idea of the House of the Dragon.
Daemon's great, I don't know how many greats it is, grandson Baelor, much easier time for sure. And this actually leads me to our one Raven that we got. We didn't get a ton of Ravens, as you mentioned, because we didn't have a whole lot of time in between episodes. So I expect in the next 9 days, stormofspoilers@gmail.com, we get a bunch of thoughts going into the penultimate, what we can now assume is a penultimate battle episode in the Game of Thrones parlance, because
it seems like
guess what happens next. So this one comes from Nicole, and Nicole says, "Great to listen to you both podcasts about Westeros again. I realized that I had missed it while listening to Night of the Seven Kingdoms episodes. Interesting comments without the hype BS. I'm very happy with how the series has got the tone and most of the casting right." And I think this point is what I wanted to start with from Nicole, because I've had to wait until this episode. I kind of had to wait for this reveal to really lay into this point. But I feel like Bertie Carvel, who's playing Baelor, has really been simmering as like the low key MVP of this series since he showed up in what, episode 2, right? The Targaryens show up.
I think so.
And they've been doing such a good job of putting him in a position where he is obviously part of the Targaryen crew, but he's just so annoyed by like the presence of his nephews and the shit that Aerion is pulling, specifically in last week's episode, that it makes him very likable to the audience. And I just kind of knew that, I kind of felt it coming, that like, because, you know, having read the books, I knew that Baelor is awesome, right? Because he does, this is all of his dialogue in the show here is directly from the text. So this is him seeing Dunk's point, and despite the fact that he knows the rules, and he really is the guy as the crown prince who is trying to rehabilitate the Targaryen brand and bring the Seven Kingdoms together and eventually rule them when his father dies. He takes what is genuinely a crazy step by standing against his brother and his 2 nephews and literally 3 Kingsguard, although, you know, whether or not those Kingsguard guys can really come at him is a matter of debate, I guess, you know.
I mean, I do want to get there eventually when we get towards the end of the episode, because I do want to speculate at least a little bit in the column, or maybe clarify in the column what the rules are that could possibly end.
Sure.
Like who needs to die, basically. But we'll get there first. I still want to stay at this top scene because I do like the conversation with Baelor, who like as a ruler is put in these seemingly tough situations, and I think does a pretty just job in opening Dunk up to trial by combat. I almost, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be a tough one.
I almost typed it several times as I was making the notes up today.
At least we have a trial of 7 now, so
sure.
That's gonna luckily
sure.
be
but yeah,
easier.
You see him maneuvering through the entire episode. You know, Dunk doesn't know about trial by combat. He probably does, but he doesn't think about it. So Baelor really sort of makes this whole situation work.
Yeah, and counter maneuvering once Aerion brings up the trial by 7, and then we have to sort of learn. And so my understanding of being able to go into certain parts of A Wiki of Ice and Fire is it was what's his name, the Cruel Targaryen, who was the last one who did a trial by 7?
Maegor
the Cruel, the guy who was a real, in a world of shit asses, was kind of like the shit ass Targaryen of the Targaryens.
Yeah.
I guess up until the Mad King.
There was, hold on, I'm gonna pull it up because there's some interesting names here that were involved. It was very long time ago. That's why they mentioned that it's a very obscure thing. So this is in 42 AC. So we are in 209 AC for the Tourney at Ashford's. This was 160 some years ago. And it was King Maegor the First, who was a bit of a dick. And he was challenged by members of a religious group called the Warrior's Sons. And they were, obviously the warrior, one of the 7. And there were 7 members of the Warrior's Sons who took on King Maegor and some knights who rose with him. And this, I guess, spoiler for any potential Maegor the Cruel series that they make eventually. I'm sure they could possibly get there. This one, Maegor the Cruel, also notably was the son of King Aegon the First. So he was the son of Aegon the Conqueror. He was like the second Targaryen king in the history of Westeros. And it was like Aegon the Conqueror, obviously conquered Westeros, installed the Targaryen dynasty, and his son was a real piece of shit and everybody hated him. And so the way this happened is literally 13 people died in the trial of 7. The only person left was Maegor at the end, and he like was so beaten up that he like passed out at the end. So he was left standing, but only temporarily. So I guess he kind of wins by not default, but by surviving. And he was like unconscious for several weeks afterwards. So like it was like the nastiest fight in the history of the land. And then they didn't do this trial style again until 209 AC here. So there's a reason why they don't do it, because the last time it went very poorly for everyone involved.
Well, I think it shows the great job they're doing making us really hate Aerion, but also giving us a peek into like his sort of mindset, where he's doing all these things that seem on the outside like dangerous for sure, maybe unprecedented, but they're all cowards moves to get out of actually fighting somebody.
100%. Yeah.
Like calling for the 7 is so he could undermine him with the Fossaway, is so he could get through it without having to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so this whole time he's trying to avoid a fight with all of these, really, I guess, shocking and bombastic political moves. Same as sort of impaling a horse rather than jousting a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very interested that as we were getting this sort of history, the sort of second layer is no matter how much this guy is using his big ass knife to crush nuts on the table, each one of these moves is a calculation so we won't have to fight anybody.
Sure.
Which I think is a great indication of what kind of asshole he is. And then later when we get Darren the drunk, which Darren is he? Does he have a number, or can I just call him Darren the drunk and we know who we're talking about?
Well, yeah, he's Darren the drunken. You don't really get a number until you become the king.
A king.
And he's just a prince at this point. So he's Prince Darren the drunken.
So when he and Aegon come, and Aeg gives a little bit of background about why Aeron is asshole, threatening young children's genitalia with knives.
Throwing cats into wells.
Yes, throwing cats into wells. But you know what? It's just the beginning of all the horrible things that I imagine happen to cats in Game of Thrones.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like the real side effect of Blood and Cheese is there's just generations of feral cats running around King's Landing, and I imagine horrible things happen to them. But I did really like this characterization where we're getting a whole bunch of Targaryens, but it is like really delineated at this point which ones I like and which ones I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean, Neil, that I'm being too nice to Darren the drunken who does off screen but does admit that he basically points the finger at Dunk rather than take accountability for his own failings as a drunken person in the tavern?
I mean,
how much do you like Darren?
It's complicated, right? Because I think that you can understand the motivations that are driving his decisions, and they're not great decisions, right? Like losing his little brother is not great. Being a shitty knight that makes his little brother want to run away in the first place, also not great. He is crumbling under the pressure of being a prince. But as we learn in this episode, he is also afflicted with something that we've seen some of the Targaryens struggle with, which is being a dreamer. And this is something that it runs in the Targaryen family. Not everybody gets it, but the ones that do have a lot of trouble, right? Helena is our dreamer in House of the Dragon, and she's a little weird because it fucks you up. Being able to see things and have those dreams come
also
true.
Some horrible things happen to her children, so she's not going to be okay for a lot of reasons.
Too. So it's like you can see how Darren, despite the fact that he has all the privilege that this world has to offer, is kind of struggling with the weight of it and is not doing very well. So, when he is confronted by his father, who I want to ask you about in a second, he sort of just like buckles under that pressure and is like, well, actually that big guy stole egg from me. and he just needs to slip out of it, as any Targaryen prince probably would. And
Right.
and I also think that it's important because it further establishes that Egg is the only honorable one, right? Like if we think about this story, our two, even though Egg lied to Dunk, he's significantly more honorable than all of his family members that we've met, save Baelor, right?
He did the lying by omission, which I agree, I do think is a lie, but I
Sure.
do think is one
even,
that you could morally stand by a little bit more.
Even that first scene where they meet and Dunk thinks that he's the stable boy, Egg never says one way or the other that he is or isn't the stable boy.
Yeah,
like
he's like, can you take these horses? And he's like, I could. Yeah, I could.
So, it's a lie by omission. So yeah, I think Darren's kind of complicated, where it's like I feel for him to a certain extent because he's tortured, and that's got to be rough. And he's also not the first son, right? Like Aerion is his older brother. So even if by some crazy happenstance, Makar's also like the fourth son, so like there's so many.
It's the other prince that Baelor's wearing his armor that we saw.
Well, that's Valar, that's his son,
right? So Valar would get the throne if Baelor got the throne and nobody died. That's the son, the lineage of sons.
Yeah. So like Baelor's line is the line of succession. So it would take a lot of terrible things happening very quickly in order to get anywhere near the throne for Darren. So he's going to live his life as a prince and die as a prince, most likely.
Yeah.
So you kind of understand that he's struggling with the existential questions around that. So you kind of understand, and you do see him try to make up for it. So I would say, like, if we're doing like the tier list of shitty Targaryens, he's like in the middle, where it's like he's not the worst one that we've met, but he's also not doing Dunk any favors here, except that he says he's going to take a fall in the fight, which I think is very funny.
If he takes a fall, I'm like more like, yeah, okay. So, you did what you can. You're obviously a mess of a human, but so are all the Targaryens. So, you're trying. I can see that. Makar, which I keep thinking is funny because they keep putting him as Mekar in the subtitles. So I keep going, Mekar. This dude seems to suck.
Well, that's the question.
He's got some sort of burr up his butt, it seems like, because by the end of like the episode, I get why he has to be there with his children, but like he's taken a side. He's forced to take a side against the crown prince, which is not good optics. So at least from Makar's perspective, I could be like, look, like my kids are all assholes. I thought I would enter them in this regional gymnastics contest, and now we're fighting to the death, brother. I think I could see where he's coming from. But that being said, he hasn't really contributed a lot to make me like him. He seems more like what I expect from the Targaryen.
That's kind of what I was curious about, because I think that his story is interesting here, because when we first meet them, he's kind of a dick. He's a bit of an asshole to Lord Ashford. But it's kind of explained away, like, oh, 2 of his sons are missing, so he's a little tense right now. And the more we learn about him, again, he is son number 4. Baelor is his older brother. He is sent to sort of tag along with his older brother, the actual crown prince. He's not as invested in the project of building the Targaryen brand or keeping the Targaryen brand strong. But I do think that the more we learn about his sons, the more sympathy I have for this dude. Because Aerion sucks.
Right.
Darren is a lot to handle, right? Like Darren is a disappointment at the very least, because he can't even be responsible enough to not lose his little brother. And Egg, despite the fact that we like Egg and he's great when he's with Dunk, is also kind of a nightmare for his father, right? Like,
yeah, he's not a good prince. He can't be a good prince.
He's not a good prince. And then we kind of know about the other son, Aemon, who as Raymond Fossaway mentions, is seen as being fairly useless and is being sent off to be a maester. He grows up to be a really good dude in the end. Like, we know that, but he doesn't know that at the moment. He just knows that that's son number 3 and he's another disappointment. So
Right.
I do, to a certain extent, feel some sympathy for Maekar because his sons keep putting him in the shittiest possible position. Like, he did not even want to be here at Ashford, and now he is having to fight his brother. Like, in a trial by combat. This is the worst possible outcome for this dude. He just wanted to sit in the stands and drink wine and like not even have to worry about his kids. Like, I feel bad for the guy to a certain extent. He seems like a dick, but I feel bad for him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to see what happens, going forward, and how much what he's about to do is about him and how much is about his children and how much is about his brother. He's gonna have a very conflicted fight going on.
Sure.
For sure. But also, I think it's hard because all the Targaryens are kind of dicks to each other and to like family.
Mhm.
It's hard for me to separate nature versus nurture in the Song of Ice and Fire universe. So you're like, he has 4 kids that he considers disappointments. I'm like, well, whose fault is that? Like, really?
That's also true.
I mean,
and
we know that
that's
we
a
know
good
that
point.
Egg and Aemon at least have like some sort of moral compass, but the other 2 seem to be lacking that. So it's like, whose fault is that?
It's a good point too, because due to the fact that he is the Prince of Summerhall and not the Crown Prince, he also does not have the same responsibilities that Baelor has. So he could have been around for his kids more. So it is notable that Valar, even though we have not had much time with him, seems to be a more well-behaved, honorable son for Baelor than any of Maekar's kids. So like, I would say on the surface, Baelor seems like he's a better dad if we're doing a ranking. And he also has the weight of being next in line for the Iron Throne. So I'm sure that comes with a lot of shit to do. So, yeah. All right. I don't feel as bad for Maekar now.
Yeah, no, Baelor being like, I'm fighting because, he's right and he's, being a just knight. I'm also like, you're also like telling your little brother he's a bad parent in the most public way.
100%.
And that's gotta be, and he's like, because of his children's sensitivity to dragon imagery, is kind of the only person who could tell his brother he's a bad person. So I should reiterate something you said at the top and we're saying at the end of last week. I am very surprised with how just in like 30 minutes, what I would consider the key drama of this series has definitely shifted to a 2-hander between Targaryens and Dunk. A lot more seamlessly than I would have expected. I was, as we were kind of talking about, a little more obsessed with like trying to figure out who these 6 people would be. And right after the episode, I was like, boy, I have a lot of questions. My first one is I was told to expect a Beesbury. So I had to go back, and he's definitely there. He just doesn't say anything.
Yeah, which is disappointing because there is a good joke to be made here, and the show has completely whiffed on it because they didn't do the earlier scene where, so Sir Humphrey Harding is the guy who broke his leg and got his horse stabbed. And obviously we know why he's there. He's there for some payback for Arryn. But before the Arryn joust, he has a joust against the Beesbury guy, who's name is also Humphrey. So it's the the Battle of the Humphreys. It's Sir Humphrey Beesbury and Sir Humphrey Harding. And they're like friends. And Sir Humphrey Beesbury is on Team Dunk. And we see him here with no lines, but he does get some sweet armor, and we can definitely see his beehive sigil all over his armor, and I think that's great. And we'll remember, Sir, what was his name? Lyman Beesbury, who got smashed in House of the Dragon
with the small council ball.
Unfortunately. So that is one of his descendants, this guy, Sir Humphrey. So I think, I don't know why this show cut that for time, as if they were like needing to be efficient here, but that's a creative choice that they made. But he is there, Sir Humphrey Beesbury.
I'm surprised it's not the fish guy, because we talked about
Could have been
few nights that got in the spot.
Could have been a Tully.
It was not a Tully.
I do think there's an important reason why Beesbury needs to be here, but that's a conversation for the storm.
Well, there was also a point where the shit-ass Fossaway was saying he was like going to go look for the Lannisters, and I was like, oh, I guess the show could also sub in a Lannister, and I would be like, yes,
sure,
of course the Lannisters are there, and I wouldn't have to know that night.
But would a Lannister turn against the Targaryens at this point? No.
Man, you had me being like, of course the Targaryens wouldn't fight each other, so I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to listen to you.
Did you think,
don't have my...
Well, you did say when you were predicting, you were like, there's no way it would be Valar. Did you think it was Valar for a second when he started riding out?
Because I recognized the armor, and I'm like,
Valar's armor for sure.
But then I was like, that seems weird. But then when he took the the helmet off and like the theme was swelling, I'm like, well, of course, this makes so much more sense.
Yeah, it could have been fun.
Also,
if it was
Valar, then I would have still been waiting for something else big to happen this season.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think the Prince joins a trial by 7 is like, what happens this season.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Dunk goes to attorney like I thought it was. So I think it's there. I don't think it would be as exciting when it is Valar, but mostly I'm happy it wasn't Valar because I don't know anything about Valar.
That's true.
So outside of he has cool armor, which I now get with a character I know, I feel like I'm getting the best of both worlds there. But maybe we'll deal with Valar in the future. He's not part of this tourney, so presumably he will have the chance to live after this trial of the 7, unless some other weird rule comes up. Let's go over the two different teams before I ask some questions about the rules. So I was very excited because Baelor Targaryen does have a Y in his last name. We do have Team Y for Dunk, so everybody has a Y in their name. We have Sir Lionel Baratheon, Laughing Storm.
Sure.
You had in the notes, of course, he wants to beat up some Kingsguard, which yes, but I still think there's some sexually charged glances amongst. So also maybe
he definitely has a bromance going on, and I love his I don't know Sir Stevron line is pretty great. Also fuck Sir Stefan. That guy sucks. We'll get to him in a second.
Who will? I mean, I guess now because Sir Raymond Fossaway is the next one here, so we have Sir Raymond Fossaway gets knighted. Real tense moment, at least for me, somebody who hadn't read the book, where I'm like, is Dunk gonna knight somebody, even though he's never really a knight? But Sir Lionel steps in, and we get our knighting oath again, which is for the most part the same as the one that we got in Game of Thrones in the episode called Knights of the Seven Kingdom. But both of them leave out part of the oath that is in the book, is my understanding. So in show and in book, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and the innocent. And then apparently in the Hedge Knight, according to my wiki, in the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women, is in the Hedge Knight, but is not in any TV show version. Have we just
I guess they just
gender neutral
skipped over that one? They don't want their show to be too woke, I guess. I'm not entirely sure why you would skip that, but it is important to point out that George very much included that in the oath that he wrote in the books. So
yes,
because
I think it's very neat is
7
the women of Westeros need knights, so I'm very happy that that's in the canon oath.
Sure.
I'm sad it's not in the TV show.
Sure. Oath. Well, in the moment with Dunk is interesting because again, we talked about this when we talked about the first episode. I have always been a believer that Sir Arlen did knight him.
Okay.
Because so far I've not seen any evidence to the contrary. However, this moment, which exists in the book and now in the show, pretty much the same way it happens. Dunk gets sort of called away and Lionel does it for him. But there is definitely a moment, I think the show does a good job of portraying, where it's like, does Dunk know the oath? And does it matter? Because I think there are several scenarios in which Dunk could not know the oath, but still have been knighted by Sir Arlen in my mind. One is that Sir Arlen didn't remember the oath and just, tapped him on the shoulder and was like, now you're a knight, because he was just an old weirdo. That's possible. Or Dunk just doesn't remember the words. So I think, all of that is possible. I still believe that there is a world in which Dunk was knighted by Sir Arlen and Dunk doesn't know the words to the oath when it comes time for Sir Raymond to be knighted. So, I mean, ultimately it's just great that Lionel's there because he's a badass. And I love the way that's shot where he's like looking up at him.
Oh, yeah. Well, also there's a line that he has when he's talking about to the royal panel and Lord Ashford and everything, where he's like, Sir Arlen, didn't really abide by the seven. And mostly this is a religious ceremony. My understanding is like the idea of a knight can make a knight is really what the rule is.
Right.
All the seven stuff is just like more official stuff you could pile on to becoming a knight. So if Sir Arlen didn't follow the religion of the seven, then maybe his oath didn't reference the seven.
And there's also that quick shot of Sir Arlen when Dunk is looking up at the dais and he sees Sir Arlen, and Sir Arlen just like shrugs at him. That to me is maybe what Dunk saw when he was knighted.
Yeah.
Like that was the moment he became a knight. It was just Sir Arlen going, all right, you're a knight now. Like, let's go.
Yeah. Which, luckily, the rules I'm not too much of a stickler for, especially if you could give that speech that Dunk gives to everybody. That's sort of like, he is upholding Sir Arlen's values to the degree that your children will uphold your values. And I'm like, this guy knows what a knight is. I'm going to care a lot less after this season whether or not he's really a knight. And that's a great movement for these 6 episodes to do sort of in the background.
Sure.
But we do have Sir Raymond, who is going to come back as a knight. My understanding of this is what splits the red apple fossaways and the green apple fossaways.
Sure. He is this is, as we've been discussing, I think pretty much every week, this is where houses tend to change sigils when there is some sort of big dramatic split. And this feels like a pretty big dramatic split in the Apple House.
So are we going to have a fun revelation of production that Raymond has always secretly had a set of armor somewhere before he gets into this fight?
That'd be fun. If he has a green apple shield somewhere, that'd be awesome.
Or he has an apple shield that like hurriedly paint screen. Just some sort of idea that is he just going to show up fully armored in a different set of armor next week, and we're going to be like, yeah, sure, that happened.
I mean, listen, as silly as that sounds, it would be awesome. And I would fully accept it, especially because of how great this show has done with the armor. Like, why wouldn't he have some armor? That's the Fossaways. That's a pretty rich house. They make their own cider. So, he's like a rich kid. He probably has dabbled in making his own armor. He's not like a poor squire necessarily. So,
well, and it does sound like the Fossaways were on this continent of Westeros before the Andals were, or that's what
they're an old family. I mean, they're at the very least they predate the Targaryens.
I was looking this up and it's like, named after someone Foss the Archer from the Age of Heroes, and he shot apples off the head. And I'm like, of course, it's always archery and apples. You can't just let the apples exist by themselves, but that's fine because we're going to see some apple combat. I'm definitely into it. Can't wait for Raymond Bratt Summer Fossaway.
Here's the fun debut. Part. It's House Fossaway of Cider Hill.
Yes.
Oh, Cider Hall. Sorry. So, they're known for their cider, which is pretty great.
Yeah. We know what we're in for. What we don't know what we're in for is Sir Robin Riesling, who is back. We talked about him a little bit last week because he only showed up for a little bit last week. He speaks in plural pronouns and has shown up to fight the crown. And he says that, like, when the crown is like opposed by the warrior, then the crown must be fought or something like that.
Sure.
Is that this situation, or is that in general? Does this guy hate Targaryens?
I guess a lot of this feels added on with Sir Robin Riesling, which I think is great, because they've really added a lot. They've sprinkled in a lot of spice to this guy who is just kind of a background character in the book, and I think that they've added quite a bit of color to him, and
a chainmail hood that comes down over his patch eye.
I mean, he is in the books described as having an eye patch, and there is, the originating story is that he took a splinter from a jousting stick pole. I forget the name of them. Lance, that's what it is. To the eye, and that's how it happened. But we don't spend a lot of time with him in the books, and I feel like he has really popped off here in the show as being a really interesting character. I wish we had more time to talk to him because I want to know about his third person life.
He seems like that one Yakuza member in that Simpsons episode where the Yakuza are fighting the mob because I think Marge has opened like a pretzel store, and there's just one guy who's standing there during the fight. And Marge is like, come inside. And Homer's like, oh, but that one guy, he's going to do something. And when he does, it's going to be cool. Yeah. And he has to go inside with that. That's what I'm getting from Robin Riesling. Yeah. This guy's going to do one thing in that fight. I'm going to be like, holy shit. And then we're not going to learn anything else about him.
Yes, that's my guess. And so far, A+ to every adaptation choice they've made with this guy. He's incredible. So I can't wait to see what he does. And, I'm glad he's here. I mean, I knew he was going to be on Team Dunk, but I'm glad he's here in force.
Yeah. Sir Humphrey Harding, we talked about, he's in it for horse-based revenge. Not only was his horse killed, but he broke his leg. And he's, as long as he's on top of a horse, he's going to fight as hard as he ever did. And so hopefully that works out for Humphrey Harding. I do think that's a little bit of a disadvantage, obviously, but I don't know how hard Humphrey Harding has to go. Like, if he falls off his horse, can you tap out? Maybe this is a good time.
Okay.
Can you tap out of this thing?
Well, kind of. No, not really. So the way it ends, it is all based on the accuser and the accused.
Okay, so even though there's 7, there's 2 mains.
Sure. Everyone else has to keep fighting until the dispute between the accuser and the accused is resolved. And that could lead to them dying, the other people involved, obviously.
Right. That's what we've learned about from history.
Yes. So in this situation, we have 2 accusers, Darren and Arian. And then we have Dunk, who is the accused. So if Dunk dies, it's over. I guess Dunk could yield and it would be over, but then they would just kill him.
And then they just chop off his hand and foot.
Yeah, or Arian would just kill him right there, and that would be it, I would imagine. So Dunk, there's no situation where Dunk would yield at this point. I mean, if he didn't run away before the trial, he's not going to yield. Right. However, if his accusers retract their accusations and yield the fight, they get to live, and it's over.
All right, so it's not it's like an annulment of the charge. It's not a loss.
Right. So Arian either has to die or he has to yield and say, I retract my accusation against Dunk.
Right, which is a huge honor.
Yeah, very embarrassing for him, obviously. He would dishonor his house. It's very embarrassing for everyone involved because they've wasted all that time. And literally, if anyone else on the field dies, that's it's like super messed up that Aerion did all that, and I'm sure that it will make the small folk love House Targaryen even more if that were to happen. So yes, so Aerion either needs to fight to his death, or he can yield and he can say, I retract, my accusation, and Dunk gets to go free. So
I mean,
we'll see. Let's see what
cool.
that little agent of chaos does.
Yeah, I mean, the guy thinks he's a dragon. I don't think yielding is very high on the list of possibilities.
Sure. If it was just
But
Darren, he would have already yielded.
True. And then we have Sir Humphrey Beesbury, which we talked about. Doesn't have any lines, has some sweet armor. I think they gotta have him say something before we start fighting. I think he has to say something.
I mean, who knows? He doesn't. I don't think he has any dialogue in the book. I'm gonna be honest. He really is just there, and he is known as he gets beaten in the Battle of the Humphreys, and he's like friends with the other Sir Humphrey, despite the fact that they were pitted against each other.
So I'm gonna go hard on this because this is a bad adaptation choice. That is confusing. It is confusing that at the end of this episode, right before the knighting of Sir Raymond, they're like, you're down 2, and one of the ones he does have, I don't know. Like, I think that's just an error in counting.
It's true.
And whatnot. Otherwise, really would have joined this adaptation, but justice for the beasts.
Yeah,
and I guess very much there.
I guess what we have to assume is that Egg went around and convinced everybody, and Sir Humphrey Beesbury was just like, all right, I'll go with the little bald boy.
Yeah,
and risk my life.
I feel like I would give him a line if you're gonna adapt his one set piece out, at least so we know that that's who he is. Otherwise, we just have to know the sigil, right? Nobody said Beesbury out loud.
Yeah, no one said it
in a couple episodes.
Here's a fun fact though for you, Dave. In the previous Trial of 7, where Maegor the Cruel was tested and tried, one of the warrior's sons was a guy named Sir Dickon Flowers, and he was a Beesbury bastard.
Oh, shit.
So
that's a story you could have somebody telling.
Sir Humphrey is not the first of the Beesbury blood to fight in a Trial of 7. This is a family lineage. They are not just masters of coin who die horrifically during coups. They also are involved in both of the Trial of 7s that have ever occurred on this continent.
Yes, give him a line to reset the stakes about how weird this trial is at the beginning of next week's episode, so we know it's Beesbury, and so we know that very cool Beesbury fact. Hashtag Beesfacts.
Hashtag Dick on Flowers.
Hashtag Dick on Flowers. I feel like that hashtag might bring up some content that I'm not expecting.
Yeah. Definitely don't post that on Twitter.
And then rounding out, coming in with the full theme of Game of Thrones is Prince Baelor Targaryen, who rides in to be the 7th, and as we have mentioned, rides quickly towards the top, if not to the top, of Dave's favorite Targaryen lists. But I do like this note that we've said out loud, but we will say again, this is a crazy thing to do for the Crown Prince to go into a trial by combat is kind of crazy.
Sure. Especially against one of his brothers. Now, because the Targaryens, they love killing each other. It is important to note that there are 2 brothers in between, and the throne would technically pass to Valar, Baelor's son. So, there's a bunch of people. Maekar doesn't have any reason to kill his brother for the throne or anything. That's
also the question where I was talking about how could these possible outcomes come, because you do have a situation where the Kingsguard is going to fight the Crown Prince, which I don't think is possible unless even if the Crown Prince gives you if this was a trial to the death, there's no way. There's no way you're a Kingsguard who agrees to fight your prince. If it's a situation where, if the prince knocks you down, you yield, and that's the way you live another day, then that makes a lot more sense to me about why Baelor actually has severely weakened his brother's team by basically taking away half its combatants, unless he fucked up and the brothers are going to be like, I don't care if you're a Targaryen. This is actually one of the weird places in the rules where I can kill you.
But well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a Sir Roland Crakehall or Sir Donald of Duskendale or Sir Willem Wild. You are you got that fancy ass armor on. You've taken an oath to protect the king and presumably the next king, and Baelor is the next king. So regardless of the rules, if you are on the field of battle and that dude is coming at you, you really have a choice to make. You got to make a business decision at that point. And I think that is very unlikely that you would take offense against him, right? Like maybe you defend yourself so that you don't get killed, but I don't think there's any scenario in which you as a Kingsguard would be attacking the Crown Prince, especially when there's 6 other dudes that you could go after.
Even though the Crown Prince is technically fighting all 7 other people, there's really only 3 other people that will take a shot at him. Maekar, Darren if he wants to, but technically I guess he could, and Aerion.
I mean,
and then the other,
is Aerion gonna take a shot at his uncle? I don't know. We'll see.
Who knows? And then, of course, Sir Stefan Fossaway, the person who has made a bad decision the day before and is now going to be in the position of having to joust the Crown Prince.
Who I also think would have to make a business decision if the Crown Prince came charging at him. You know, like he's given up his honor for a lordship for the not Crown Prince, Aerion. So if Baelor comes at him, I think he runs away. Like... You know, like I don't think he's attacking Baelor either. I feel like there's only one person on the field who takes a swing at Baelor, and it's his own brother.
Good to know. We'll have to keep an eye out, see if some of these kids grow some dark hair on their stones before we start fighting. I do want to talk a lot of this episode about all of the new drama, but before we go into the storm, I do want to take a moment and say another great episode for Dunk. I think the television trope of the weather is Dunk's mood, and the harder it's raining, the more Dunk is convinced he's in a horrible place, is really fun. It also got me questioning, they just canceled the jousts, right? Like that this tournament's over.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like this is going to spoil the mood for the rest of the tournament.
Between the trial and the rain, I don't think, and the mummers are gone. Like I think this tournament's over.
They are packing this one up. Poor Lord Ashford. He went into debt for this, and very quickly.
Yeah, had to crawl on his hands and knees for a nut after it was all over.
Yeah, tough week for this guy.
I mean, but hopefully he bets on Dunk.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess that's true. He could get on Kalshi and bet on I would bet
he was on Kalshi before Baelor rode out, put it all on Dunk,
right?
And now he got in when the odds were excellent.
Exactly. So I think the tournament's pretty much over.
And then I really love all the stuff with Steely Pate. And there was a time period last week where I was like, if I'm going to assume that someone's going to knight Raymond, why wouldn't you knight Steely Pate? But I do like
he's not much of a fighter, position. He's got a set of skills, and it is making really great armor and the stuff that goes on the outside of a shield.
Yeah. And I think just an excellent idea of what a gentle masculine presence can be for another man who is obviously in crisis. Just 2 big men, one with an excellent beard, being like, you're going to give it your all. And here is a positive art history interpretation of your shield that you made up. What a fantastic scene. I love the take on it. And I love that Dunk has a summer tree, and hopefully it's a long summer tree.
Sure.
But the distinction between sunrise and sunset was never one I thought about more, but now I'm going to forever associate with that sigil. I think that might be one of the smartest sigil decisions I've seen in this show so far. Considering one places we had an archer relative and we like to make apple cider. I really like that a sigil can be complex enough where it's like, is that sunrise or sunset? And could be both.
Dunk's sigil rules. It's, I think, one of the best ones. And, you know, I mean, I would say that this is not a hot take, but I would say Ser Duncan the Tall is probably George's favorite character in all of his stories.
Good.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that. I do, before we get into the storm, want to talk about someone who I don't think is anyone's favorite character.
Yeah.
But he did provide this week's bodily function. And that was, and I would like to, though, stick up for, and listen, I'm not even a team Bracken person. I generally take the side of the Blackwoods in the great Blackwood v. Brackens, because Lady Alice Lane Blackwood is the badass, and I can't wait to meet her in House of the Dragon, hopefully this next season. But Sir Otho, the Brute of Bracken, who gives us a nice long fart here, right when we think he's about to do the right thing, is kind of done dirty by the show, because in the books, this does happen. Sir Otho, he doesn't fart though. Sir Otho is approached by Dunk in this moment as he's giving this speech, but Sir Otho like responds with dialogue and says like, you know, best of luck to you, but I don't know who Sir Arlen was. Sorry, bud. You know, like, you know, can't help you. And it's, you know, it's obviously it's not very heroic. He doesn't help our guy, but it's far more honorable than what he does in this show. So it's a little slanderous, if I'm being honest, against this House Bracken. Then again, House Bracken sucks. So
yeah, I don't remember liking the Brackens
in the TV universe. They're just kicking this house while it's down. So
first time I was watching this episode, I of course had missed the Beesbury. So when he stood up, I'm like, "That's a Beesbury," because he looks like the Jason Momoa of Beesburys, and I'm like, "What the fuck? What is that guy doing with the apiaries?" So yeah, but it was. But then the fart one was pretty.
He's got a pretty great beard though, so I feel it necessary to stick up for him at least a little bit.
Well, maybe he'll apologize after whatever happens.
Yeah. And I have one more thing before we get to the storm.
Yeah.
Darren's dream.
Sure.
I want to know what you think it means here in the calm. We can discuss maybe what it may or may not mean in the storm, but I would love a good calm theory from you as to how you would interpret his dream.
So the calm version is going to be I'm going to have to say it has to do something with this season, because I don't, storm-wise, we know a little bit about where we're going, but not a ton. I don't want to necessarily be a Joffrey of the whole situation and just tell you what's going to happen.
Sure.
But at least when I heard it this time, I assumed the fire would be like a conflict. I didn't assume it would be like an actual fire, and that the giant dragon landing on him, and the dragon was dead and he was alive, meant that Dunk's somehow going to win this trial of the seven by being shielded by Prince Baelor, the large dragon. But Baelor is literally going to fall on him in that shielding. And that's going to be like a key moment where maybe Baelor goes down, but Dunk ends up being shielded by this huge dragon.
Interesting.
And it would have to be a metaphorical fire, not a real fire. There is a possibility it's a real fire, and this happens in a completely different way. But I think if I'm going to speculate about that, I have to do it in the storm.
Sure. And there are going to be at least 4 quote unquote dragons on the battlefield, all of whom have pretty big egos at the very least. So
right. And if it's just like a dragon that is as large as Darren's describing, it could just be the house the whole House Targaryen can fall on Egg and break. I don't know how that leads to something like the Mad King, but again, we could talk a little bit more about in the storm about if this prophecy is even to do with this season or not.
We do know that things don't go well for House Targaryen in the end.
Things do not go well for House Targaryen
Spoiler alert
in the
for
end.
Westeros.
Well, Jon Snow's living up there fine with the good boy ghosts.
Sure.
Maybe things are going okay for some of House Targaryen.
Technically another egg.
Technically another egg. Yeah. 3 shows, 3 eggs, 2 I like, 1 real shit ass. But we'll be getting to that and more as we transition this week into the storm.
I am the storm, brother. The first storm and the last. And you're in my way.
All right, we're back. Let's go right back to the dream since that's where we're at. My question is, there's another world where this is about the Targaryen's last real shot at dragons dying in the Summerhill fire, where Dunk also is, and where his story ends. I know that he's supposed to be alive when this happens, but that doesn't mean that it's not part of the journey down to that.
Yeah.
But if the big dragon is like the house, then if Egg is trying to reestablish House Targaryen's power by hatching some dragons, that could be this big fire, and that could be the hope sort of breaking on Dunk. I don't know why Dunk would be that important, but it would be something. If you were a dreamer, maybe you see the Targaryen version of that being important.
Sure.
He's sort of like incapable of seeing it from Dunk's perspective.
Well, and that's the thing about the dragon dreams. They're very difficult to interpret because they could mean a whole bunch of different things. And I like this because this, with the exception of the fact that Dunk also dies in the tragedy at Summerhall, this fits, right? Like the eventual fall of House Targaryen sort of does start with the fire at Summerhall, where it's like King Aegon dies and Rhaegar is born, and Rhaegar is ultimately the Targaryen who fucks it all up and gets defeated by Robert and his rebellion, and so on and so forth. We know the rest of the story from there. So it's possible. What I will say is that there is a much more direct metaphor in this very contained story that I think you've done a very good job of maybe picking apart here. Because I think at this point it's, especially now that we know that Baelor is on Team Dunk, this is not very subtle that he's in danger, girl. But how something like that might happen is an interesting thing in and of itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't want to say it in the column, but the idea that this season will be known as something else other than Aegon Targaryen was in hiding.
Yeah.
Absolutely, the Crown Prince, basically, and to use my metaphor from the column, the Crown Prince dying at a regional gymnastics competition is insane.
Yeah, that does, like I said last week in the storm, there's one thing that this season could be remembered for that's way bigger than Egg revealing that he's a Targaryen. That does rise to that level, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, so it is. it's gonna be fun. I also have a few questions about how we're gonna break it down. But before we get to that, let's talk about your choice this week for the Catelyn Stark Memorial Ironic Statement Award.
Yeah, so I have 2. One gets paid off right in this episode, which is Stefan Fossaway, who's just such a little bitch, saying "I am for you" and giving a whole very committed speech. This is one of those things I also remember in the book of being very convinced. George is so good sometimes at the sleight of hand. As I was reading the book, very convinced that this dude was on Team Dunk. So when
he's like, "So I'm for you," and you're like, "Yeah, great."
So the next morning when he betrays them, instantly that dude is burning with all 7 hells, the fires of all 7 hells for that guy. So it excellently executed. And then my other Catelyn Stark Memorial ironic statement is less of a statement and more of the staging of a scene where Dunk goes in to meet the Targaryen princes and negotiate, obviously, what's going to happen to him. There is a sort of specific way that they are all seated, you will notice. And they're all seated at a table, a long table. They're all behind it. And we have from left to right, we have Lord Ashford, we have Lord Leo Tyrell, we have Prince Baelor in the middle, we have his brother Maekar to the right of him, and then we have Aerion at the end. And it reminds me of a very famous visage from human history. That, like, let's just say something bad was going to happen.
You're, of course, talking about Michelangelo's The Castrum Lost Season 6.
Exactly. Or the DVD cover of Season 4 of Battlestar Galactica.
That also famously by Michelangelo.
Yes, let's just say that you were gathering people together the night before something terrible is going to happen. You would position maybe the person who's going to have a terrible thing happen to them in the middle, and then somewhere to either their left or right is someone who's going to do the terrible thing. I'm just saying.
Well, there you go. Some art history for your HBO television show.
Leave it to George. And this, I guess, is kind of from the books, but George does not describe it, in any sort of echoing the Last Supper sort of way. But I like that the show went there. It's very fun.
Yeah. Famously, one of the disciples just smashing walnuts with a huge knife in the Last Supper. Next week on Trailer Neil, we definitely get some flashbacks, which we talked about maybe being, I guess, a lot of episode 5, or we talked about maybe some of them being in this episode, I think, because we were assuming we would have this gathering being an entirely different one. And then we have some fight scenes, very notably some close-ups of Dunk with his helm that looks like a helm on as he's charging into battle, and some ceremonial unsheathings of the weapons as we get to see some of these not tournament weapons like a battle axe, and it appears one of them at least has a mace. So that looks fun. It all looks like it could take place in the first 10 minutes of next week's episode, which actually is interesting because it's only like a 35-minute episode or something. So that's a full third. What do you think's happening next week?
Well, I do. And listen, this is going to be very interesting to see how they do this, because I think this is an interesting place to add some flashbacks, especially if Dunk is remembering his childhood, because I was rereading the fight portion of the book earlier today. And there are moments in the fight where Dunk is recalling his life in Flea Bottom, because at a certain point mentally goes from his night training to his street fighting training. And he's like, this is the kind of fight that I used to get into as a kid, and this is how I have to do this now. So I think that those are moments where the show could cut away. So it could be cutting back and forth. It could just like start with a longer flashback. That could be really interesting. It is notable that the fight in the books, it doesn't go on for very long. It's not a super long fight. It's very brutal and actually kind of quick. So I'll be curious to see if they maybe extend it a little bit or give us, and I think the reason why it feels quick in the books is because it's all from Dunk's POV. So like he at certain points looks around to what's happening and like notices, Sir Lionel rides by and it's like doing something, and like that's it. We don't really get to see what Sir Lionel is going to do, and we just sort of hear about it later. So I think that you could extend it by obviously moving the camera around the battlefield and showing us what's happening. So I think that'll be interesting. The other thing I think is really interesting about that sequence in the book that I wonder if the show is going to do, which is a really sort of classic TV thing that TV shows hate to do, but every once in a while a show is brave enough to do, which is that in the book, Dunk keeps his helmet on the entire fight. And it is very notable because there's several times in the book where it like George describes him as like having to dig mud out of his visor and like feeling like the ringing of his helm as he's being hit by certain things, and like the way the ground feels when he hits it and his helmet's on, but he never takes his helmet off. And like there's one in the version of the book that I have that has illustrations, there's like a really great the final moment of the fight, and it's Dunk and he has his helmet on. And I'm curious to see if the show's going to keep Peter Claffey's face underneath a metal helmet the entire time.
Well, if they're close enough on him to get his eyes the way through, like some of the shots are from the jousting thing, I think there's a way they could have their cake and eat it too. But you are right that it's much.
Shows don't like to do that.
It's the Mandalorian. Yeah. It's the Mandalorian all over.
They don't like to have their star be under a helmet the entire time. This is the kind of thing where eventually you would have his helmet get knocked off so that his face can be out. And I think that that's potentially true for several people in the fight, because everybody's going to have a helmet on at the start. And most of the people have their helmet on the entire fight. So I'm curious to see if that holds in the way that they adapt it. And, I expect it to be pretty brutal, but maybe furious and short. But I still think there's a way, especially if they're weaving in flashbacks, where it's the entire episode and it ends. The episode ends shortly after the fight with a really awful cliffhanger.
I was talking to my friend Julian, who you play some Marvel Rivals with. Mm-hmm. Also a large, has read The Hedge Knight, is a fan of this series and this story. And we were kind of debating if you do all of the battle and do live up to the HBO penultimate battle episode that Game of Thrones had a big part in sort of like starting that tradition of the network. I don't know how important network traditions are, but especially now since it's going to head into Netflix and might dissolve, you might want to hang on to those traditions even more than ever.
Sure.
And the story can sort of support that. But we also know that the morrow is another 31-minute episode, so very short, the finale episode.
And that's the other tough thing, is there's not a whole lot happens after. Like if there is a Ned Stark moment in this series, it's right after the battle, and I think that it could be the thing that next week's episode closes on. But there is literally like 5 paragraphs of text after that in this entire novella. So the finale episode, and it would be very interesting to see them add something to the end of it. I'm sure that there's plenty of potential there. I can think of a few ways they could extend that and sort of tease it out a little bit, and it would be kind of a sad episode, but you could see a situation where they could make a whole 30-minute episode after that big moment. But I do think they have to end there next week.
Well, the other thing we were talking about is
like, if you're going to do the penultimate episode thing with this, like, there is a specific thing you got to end on here.
Could you just do an episode of build up? He puts on the helmet, we charge, we cut like the book does to his time in Flea Bottom. We do the rest of the episode and we come out to like a clash, and the clash leads us into the battle of the final episode.
I mean, maybe. I do think the audience that is kind of primed now for the battle to start would maybe feel a little weird about that. I kind of think you got to do it next week.
Do I need to know this female character that helps Dunk seemingly escape Flea Bottom in the next week's on trailer?
I don't think so. I think this is a new character, and or at least it's not a character that's featured in the books. The fact that the next episode is called In the Name of the Mother leads me to believe that it might actually be Dunk's mother, because we've heard mention of Dunk's father, right? He said his dad was a thief and that he probably saw him hanged but didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't heard anything about Dunk's mom. So maybe we get a flashback of Dunk's mom. That would be interesting.
Interesting. All right. That would be interesting. Or maybe it's just somebody who is protecting
Sure.
Dunk
Could
because
be a
he's young and
friend in
innocent,
Fleabottom,
and that's
yeah.
part of the
When he was orphaned. I think this would be a really interesting spot for them to show some stuff that the book didn't get into, which was like Dunk's life in Fleabottom, maybe the moment or circumstances that led to Sir Arlen sort of adopting him into service. But I also think that that's stuff that they could also do in future seasons. They could continue to sort of explore Dunk's lore as they go along here.
I feel like we got all we need to. We can get more from Sir Arlen, but I feel like we got all we need to this season already.
Sure.
Like the knighting montage followed by the speech.
Oh, we got a lot of Sir Arlen.
Ooh, yeah, we did. That's right. I forgot about that.
More than we expected.
Yeah, no, I mean, just a fart. We're going down in terms of our scatological, genitalia-based humor, but it is still here. So I do appreciate that this show was a show that could give us those sort of anticlimax moments, but also when Baylor rolls out to the Game of Thrones theme, you're like, fuck yeah, here we go.
I have a feeling next week's bodily function is going to be bleeding. Lots of bleeding.
Sweet. Can't wait. Neil, is there anything else that we have to talk about before we enter a long night and between episodes?
I think we covered it all. Shout out to you for getting most of Team Dunk correct. I don't think there was really any easy way to get that Baylor was going to be on his team, because the story does a pretty good job of hiding it. So
yeah, it's an insane thing.
Yeah.
It's literally in my notes. It's like, oh, it could be the Targaryens.
Why would the Crown Prince do
this?
this? That's crazy. But George is gonna George, as I keep saying. As much as this has been presented as a fun romp buddy comedy, we are now in the original Game of Thrones part of this show. We have entered the part where Ned Stark meets his end. And it's only going to go off from here. So I'm very happy. I hope that people stuck with it personally, because I know that there were a lot of people, especially on social media, that are like, this tone is not for me. This doesn't feel like my Game of Thrones. Maybe these are the people who like really love House of the Dragon, which is fine if that's your flavor of Thrones. I also like House of the Dragon just fine. But I hope those people stuck around, because the part that they're going to love is coming.
Hell yeah. So until next month, or no, a week from next Monday, we will be waiting in anticipation to see what happens on the Seven Kingdoms episode 5, In the Name of the Mother. And then, of course, after that airs, Neil and I will be back breaking it down. Until then, go out there, be excellent to each other, protect the innocent, and protect the women in the name of the maid. I'm going to say that.